Coming up on this Monday edition of Newsline at Noon, Korea's security chief Kim Kwan-jin, now in Washington, says Seoul could increase humanitarian aid to help the US-led fight against Islamic State militants. Washington says several Arab nations have offered to join airstrikes against Islamic State, while Britain vows to hunt down the killer of a British aid worker. Plus, teenage golfer Kim Hyo-joo wins the Evian Championships in France, becoming the third youngest winner of a major LPGA competition. These stories and more on Newsline at Noon.
It's noon Monday, September 15th here in Korea. Thanks for tuning in. Live from Seoul, I'm Eoh Jin-joo.
It's very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broome. Our top story this lunchtime, Korea's National Security Advisor Kim Kwan-jin says the Korean government is examining ways to support global efforts to hopefully rid the world of Islamic State extremists.
President Park Geun-hye's top security aide is in the United States this week for talks with his American counterpart and other high-ranking officials there. Park Ji-won reports.
Speaking upon his arrival in Washington for a 4-day trip for talks with U.S. officials, Kim Kwan-jin said Korea is looking at diverse ways, mostly in terms of humanitarian support, to help U.S.-led efforts to defeat Islamic State militants.
Korea has already provided some $1.2 million in aid for Iraqi refugees. I think Korea can look into giving some additional support.
When asked about the possibility of Korea joining in military action such as logistics support, Kim said the U.S. has yet to make an official request to Seoul. During his stay, Kim will meet with his American counterpart Susan Rice and other senior U.S. officials for discussions on a wide range of issues, including North Korea and the South Korea-U.S. alliance. Regarding the postponement of the transfer of wartime operation control from the U.S. to South Korea, Kim said talks will continue at an annual defense cooperation meeting set to be held next month in Washington. Seoul hopes to postpone the transfer by some 5 to 7 years from the currently set schedule of the end of 2015. When asked about the possibility of introducing the U.S. high-altitude missile defense system THAAD to South Korea, Kim said there had been no further discussions, nor had there been any agreement on the issue. Kim added the focus of his visit will be issues surrounding the Korean peninsula, including North Korea's nuclear and human rights issues, as well as American detainees in the north. Kim is scheduled to return to Seoul on Wednesday. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Now, Kim's remarks on offering up Seoul's support to counter the Islamic State threat comes as the militant group murdered another Western captive, this time a 44-year-old British aid worker.
Yeah, as you'd expect, the beheading of David Haines, a father of two who was only in Syria to help vulnerable people displaced by the fighting there, has drawn more international condemnation and some very strong words from the British Prime Minister. Shin Se-min reports.
British Prime Minister David Cameron has promised justice for murdered aid worker David Haines. At a meeting of the government's Emergency Response Committee on Sunday, Cameron said his murderers, those belonging to the Islamic State, were the embodiment of evil and precisely why Britain and the world needed to destroy them.
They are killing and slaughtering thousands of people, Muslims, Christians, minorities across Iraq and Syria. They claim to do this in the name of Islam. That is nonsense. Islam is a religion of peace. They are not Muslims, they are monsters.
The beheading of the 44-year-old aid worker has increased the pressure on Cameron to counter the IS threat, this as they've threatened to take the life of another British national, Alan Henning. The international community is circling the wagons. Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott pledged on Sunday to deploy 600 troops to the Middle East to aid the U.S.-led campaign against the terrorist group. He said the first set of 200 military personnel would arrive in the United Arab Emirates in the next couple of days. In response to the latest IS video release, U.S. President Barack Obama said America would stand shoulder to shoulder with England as part of the broad coalition of nations being formed to fight the militant group. Some 40 countries, including 10 Arab states, have so far offered their support in countering the threat. U.S. officials say that some of the Arab nations have even offered to join in airstrikes against Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
The United States has once again called for the immediate release of 3 American detainees in North Korea. U.S. State Department spokesperson Jen Psaki made the plea following news that 24-year-old Matthew Miller was sentenced on Sunday to 6 years of hard labor on charges of committing hostile acts against Pyongyang. Miller, who is from California, was detained in April after he allegedly tore up his tourist visa at Pyongyang airport and demanded asylum. He is one of 3 Americans currently being held by the North. Jeffrey Fowle, who was arrested in May for reportedly leaving behind a Bible in his hotel, is awaiting trial. And Kenneth Bae is currently serving a 15-year sentence of hard labor on charges of trying to overthrow the North Korean regime. Psaki called on Pyongyang to grant amnesty to all 3 and added that the acts they are accused of would not warrant imprisonment in any other country in the world. A high-level meeting on the human rights situation in North Korea will take place on the sidelines of the 69th UN General Assembly, which is set to open on Tuesday in New York City. Now, it's sure to bring renewed attention to the issue, with the top diplomats of South and North Korea, as well as the United States, expected to face off over the matter. Kim Min-ji tells us more.
A renewed focus on North Korea's human rights situation is expected to heighten diplomatic tensions at the upcoming UN General Assembly. This as top diplomats from South Korea and the U.S. prepare to attend a high-level meeting on the North's human rights issue, scheduled to take place on the sidelines of the UN gathering. The meeting has been organized as a way to garner support for a UN General Assembly resolution on the issue. Pyongyang's human rights situation has received greater international attention this year following the release of a report by the UN Commission of Inquiry that accuses North Korea's leaders of widespread, systematic and gross human rights violations. South Korea's Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se is almost certain to participate in the high-level talks, as is U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, reflecting Washington's growing interest in the issue. Kerry said last month in his Asia policy speech that North Korea's prison camps must be shut down immediately. Kerry's attendance is likely to draw diplomats from other countries to participate. Meanwhile, North Korea appears to be making efforts to defend itself. The North's Foreign Minister Lee Soo-young is scheduled to give a speech at the General Assembly, which will mark North Korea's first ministerial address in 15 years. And on Saturday, Pyongyang released its own assessment of the human rights situation, claiming the rights of North Korean people are well protected under its socialist system. The report also said that Pyongyang is open to holding talks with any country at any time on the human rights situation in North Korea. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
And on to some political news. The interim chief of the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy is on the verge of stepping down. With the party in a state of disarray, members of her own party appear more than willing to give her a nudge amid criticism that she messed up talks with the ruling party over a special Seoul ferry bill, which sits in limbo at the National Assembly. Ji Myung-gil reports.
Park Young-sun of the New Politics Alliance for Democracy doesn't just appear to be thinking about stepping down as interim chief. There are speculations she may even quit the party altogether. It comes amid pressure from within the main opposition bloc to step down both as the chief of its emergency committee and as its floor leader.
We've been urging floor leader Park Young-sun for her voluntary resignation. If she does not step down, we will have to put some pressure on her to do so.
The contention stems from Park's handling of a special bill that would set up an investigation into April's ferry disaster. Park on 2 separate occasions reached agreements with the ruling Saenuri Party on the legislation, but both times the compromise was met with fierce criticism from the victims' families and from within her own party. Park looked to step aside last week by appointing 2 co-chairmen to lead its emergency committee, but the proposal was quickly batted down by senior party members, who objected to those who were nominated. With Park on the outs, veteran lawmakers with the opposition party have already begun thinking about who her replacement should be and call for someone who is more moderate. Whoever that next leader is will walk into a party torn apart by factionalism and infighting. The party also remains at odds with the ruling Saenuri Party at the National Assembly, which has passed 0 bills in recent months because of the ferry bill standoff. Kim Hyo-joo, Arirang News.
Stay up to date on the latest news out of Korea, connecting to our team of reporters about the issues that matter to Korea. On air, on your mobile, online. Find out more about Korea on Newsline at Noon with Mark Broome and Eoh Jin-joo.
I'm Eoh Jin-joo.
Market researcher, strategy analytics, said Thursday that LG Electronics brought in about 11. Right, well, let's talk about some sports news now and the final LPGA major of the season. The 2014 Evian Championships in France was won by a Korean golfer, and while you might expect that golfer to be Park In-bi or Park Se-ri, some of the biggest names on the tour, it was in fact a 19-year-old sensation that came out of nowhere to take home the top prize in very dramatic fashion. Our SJ Lee reports.
19-year-old Kim Hyo-joo is a star in the KLPGA, but after this weekend, she's a superstar in the one that counts, the LPGA. The 20th-ranked Korean started off the event shooting an amazing 10 under 61 in the first round and went into the final round in the lead. Fellow Koreans Chang Han-ah, Heo Mi-jung, and Chen Ha-yeon piled the pressure on Kim, but it was Australia's Kerry Webb, a 7-time major winner, who stormed through in the back 9 to take a 1-stroke lead going into the 18th hole. But the Korean teenager kept her composure and birdied a tough putt to put her tied for the lead. The pressure was too much for the 39-year-old Webb, who would bogey on the final hole, giving Kim the season's final tour major.
I'm very happy I won. When I finished, I felt out of this world. I felt terrible when I bogeyed on the in-course par 3, but I was able to birdie on what I thought was the toughest hole, so I feel great.
It might be her very first LPGA Tour major win, but given this performance, we'll be hearing a lot more about Kim Hyo-joo in the years to come. SJ Lee, Arirang News.
Well, congratulations to her. Now, in some economic news, and with a focus on economic revitalization in the latter half of this year, President Park Geun-hye has marked expansion of an economic innovation center in her political stronghold of Daegu in Korea's southeast. The so-called Creative Economy Innovation Center, along with the city of Daegu, signed a number of agreements with Samsung on Monday to better cooperate to establish a regional ecosystem for the creative economy. Now, creative economy is President Park's vision of converging IT with culture and other sectors to spur growth and to expand jobs. The Daegu case, is the first of the government's 17 regional centres that will join hands with conglomerates to offer counselling and support for innovation-driven small and mid-sized businesses and ventures. Import prices dropped for the 24th straight month in August, mainly due to falling international oil prices and the strong Korean currency. The Bank of Korea says the import price index dropped 0.8% from the previous month to nearly 94.2. That's a near 10% drop on year. Dubai oil fell nearly 4% from the previous month, and the Korean won strengthened 0.5% against the greenback to 1,025 won. Export prices rose 0.1% in August from the previous month. Okay. Okay, well, it's Monday, so it means it's time for Industry Insight. And there's a burgeoning industry out there that some people say is on the brink of revolutionizing the world.
Right. It's none other than 3D printing, and they say it could be one of the key technology of the 21st century. Arirang News' Kim Jin gives us the details of the evolving 3D printing industry here in Korea.
In the beginning, it was the cool factor that early adopters recognized from 3D printing. And the early players like Stratasys, 3D Systems, and Shapeways from the US and Japan's DMN were quick to cater to hobbyists and industrialists with an eye on the future. In Korea, those first in line for a 3D printer include researchers in the medical sector looking for innovative ways to treat patients. For example, a local hospital, St. Mary's Hospital of Catholic University, successfully performed an artificial joint treatment earlier this year by using 3D printing to make customized prototypes. And the hospital says it wants to try to expand the technology to make functioning organs in the future. Other large hospitals are racing to patent the three-dimensional printing technology that will be used for skull or dental implants and drug delivery agents in the human body. But despite these promising signs, the 3D printing technology is currently in its infant stages in Korea. Barriers like price and usability are preventing mainstream users from getting their hands on the technology. But some 3D printing companies are trying to change that. Take a look.
3D printers aren't as commonly used by average consumers in Korea because of its huge price tag. The hardware sells at around $2,000 US. In order to break down such economic barriers, 3D developer founded by its parent trading company Mide International Trade launched a leasing and rental program for the public.
We want to lead more people can use the 3D printing technology because we believe this is a very good thing. It is very good for the industrial efficiency. Also, it can help people to get their own customized product. Also, they can change people's lifestyle. So, in order to expand this new technology, we were trying to watch what is the really barrier of the market.
With monthly rental fees set at $35 US and an option to buy at the end of a 2-year contract period, the company says its printer leasing program creates easier accessibility for customers to try the new hardware. The program also assures the machine will continue to operate properly even after its purchase. The company says its customers are not limited to a specific group, but includes manufacturers of toys and jewelry, as well as R&D centers, universities, and ordinary people.
Yeah, for example, we can try to make my own shoes. Maybe somebody can scan my feet, and then maybe we can design. We can change some design to make my own shoes, and then I can just print it.
Another company is also trying to widen the use of 3D printers by making the hardware more easy to use for the average customer. Open Creators, the country's first startup company in the 3D printing industry, says its printer, called the Almond, is by far the easiest printer to use yet. For most people, it takes just the afternoon to get it up and running.
Almond has an auto-leveling function. It checks 9 points of a surface and adjusts the appropriate slope of the bed, eliminating the need for the user to manually attach any nuts and bolts. Also, there's a cooling pen that brings down the temperature of the melted material, which improves printing quality.
And for consumers who are worried about looks, the Almond has both substance and style. It was awarded some of the world's most renowned design awards, including the Red Dot and IDEA Awards. Open Creators says it's working toward a vision to try to create an atmosphere, a culture where every household has a 3D printer in their homes, equivalent to appliances like TVs and vacuum cleaners. The company offers a weekly workshop open to anyone who wants to maximize the utility of its product.
These efforts by the 3D printing industry are expected to open up the technology to the mainstream and pave the way for more specialized applications to become a part of our everyday lives. Kim Hyo-joo, Arirang News.
And moving on, China is not just a land of opportunity for Korean exporters.
Yeah, the spending clout of Chinese tourists to Korea is having an overwhelmingly positive effect on the stock prices of Korean firms in the tourism sector. Eoh Jin-joo has the details.
In Seoul's bustling shopping district of Myeongdong, it's very easy to find Chinese tourists, and the ever-increasing number of visitors from China is driving strong gains in tourism-related shares. According to the Korea Exchange, the stock prices of 31 firms listed on the local bourse that are closely linked to or popular with Chinese tourists have risen 51% on average since the end of last year. Contrast that against the 1.1% gain the benchmark Kospi posted over the same period. Because of this, many Korean businesses that used to rely on domestic consumption by Koreans are eyeing these high-spending customers from across the West Sea. In general, Chinese people are wealthier than they used to be. China's gross national income per capita last year stood at over $6,700. That's more than 4 times higher than in 2003. And due to the popularity of Korean pop culture in China, experts say the country's spending power has a massive impact on Korean companies, particularly those in the entertainment, cosmetic, and clothing industries. And with more Chinese tourists forecast to visit Korea during the upcoming Chinese holiday season early next month and the Incheon Asian Games that kick off this week, expectations are high that they'll give domestic demand in Korea a much-needed boost. 황지혜, 아리랑 뉴스.
And time now for a look through some of the other international headlines we're following on this Monday afternoon. For that, we turn to our Eunice Kim standing by at the news center.
Eunice, update is on the situation in Ukraine. The ceasefire that has been in place since September 5th, I believe, officially still holds, but we understand there has been some fierce fighting in the east of the country.
Indeed, Mark. The New York Times is reporting that at least 6 people have been killed in all-out fighting that broke out on Sunday on the northern side of Donetsk between Ukrainian forces and rebel fighters. Billowing thick smoke was spotted near Donetsk's airport as gunshots were heard across the city. Local residents said the intensity of the fighting has subsided since the truce, but that sporadic fighting still occurs daily. Kiev has said that NATO nations have begun delivering weapons to Ukraine without specifying which countries. 5 NATO nations, including the U.S., though, have denied sending arms. Poland's state gas firm said its supply of natural gas from Russia's Gazprom has been cut by 45%, prompting the Central European state to halt sending in gas to Ukraine through reverse flow pipelines. Poland has been an outspoken critic of Moscow for its support of pro-Russian separatists in eastern Ukraine, and its deputy prime minister attributed the disruptions to Russia's attempt to test Polish resolve. In Sierra Leone, a 4th doctor sickened by Ebola has died, dealing a huge blow to the impoverished country struggling to push back the virus amid a serious shortage of healthcare professionals. The country's chief medical officer said Dr. Olivier Buck died late Saturday, hours after the World Health Organization had said it could not help to medically evacuate her to Germany. The WHO estimates more than 300 health workers have become infected with the highly contagious virus in Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone alone, with nearly half of them now dead. The head of the UN Health Agency, Margaret Chan, said the overall Ebola death toll has exceeded 2,400 people as of Friday, adding that the true toll is likely even higher as infection rates continue to escalate. And finally, a church guest house belonging to a famous Nigerian preacher has collapsed in Lagos, leaving at least 41 people dead. The 5-story structure was under construction when it came down on Friday. Since then, some 130 people have walked out or been pulled out of the wreckage. The cause of the collapse has yet to be given, though preacher and televangelist T.B. Joshua of the Synagogue Church of All Nations said he suspected foul play tied tied to a low-flying plane, a theory rescue workers have ruled out.
Well, we're off to a cloudy start to the week, and the clouds will hang around the peninsula for the remainder of the day, though it could get a bit brighter as we head into the midday. In the meantime, there is a 30% chance of passing showers in store for the central regions and both Jeollado provinces later in the day. So with the clouds covered, highs are expected to be similar to yesterday or maybe just a bit lower. So let's take a closer look at the readings for today. The afternoon high in the capital will rise to 27, while Daegu will only make it to 25, and Gwangju and Busan should climb to 26 later in the day. And for other regions, Jeju Island and Daejeon will top out at 26 and 25, while Dokdo should see a high of 23 later in the day. And the weather outlook for this week is looking pleasant. Typical autumn weather will persist with a fair amount of sun, but big drops in temperatures are expected on Wednesday due to showers in the southern areas. Well, that's all for me today, and hope you have a wonderful rest of the day.
Well, thank you, Chien, for the weather update. And that brings us to the end of this Monday's edition of Newsline at Noon.
Yes, Jin-joo and I will be back at the same time on Tuesday. Until then, goodbye.